Today is Tuesday, November 22nd, 2011, and this is Vos de Sueños After Dark. Today, we have Past Sins, Chapter 5, Theatrical Trouble, by Penstroke, assisted by Batty Gloom. It had been about a week since Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon's prank had gone bad. Nick sat on the sole swing outside the Ponyville Elementary schoolhouse. Twilight had let Nick skip a few days of school, but wouldn't let the disguised alicorn hide in the library for the rest of her life. The filly stared at the ground with tears in her eyes, gently swinging back and forth by just a few inches in each direction. Despite the fact that all her classmates were laughing, giggling, and playing, Nix couldn't bring herself to smile. In truth, she was trying her hardest to keep herself from sobbing. Things had been different back at the library. Twilight had been avoiding her, and Nix couldn't understand why. That, and Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon had become unbearable since Nix returned to school as Diamond Tiara enacted her vengeance for getting grounded because of what had happened. They had spread nasty rumors around the school, picked on Nix openly, and even tried to frame Nix for putting a tack on Miss Cheerilee's chair. Thankfully, the teacher had seen through their ruse. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon were now missing recess, sitting at their desks as punishment for the tack. It gave Nix her first peaceful recess in days, though it did little to raise the filly's spirits. While Twilight had forgiven her and said it was all right, Nix still felt horrible. She had wanted to hurt Twilight at some point in time. She didn't know when she had or why, but the memory lingered in Nix's mind. How could she have ever wanted to hurt Twilight? She was such a nice pony. It was Twilight who had found her in the forest, had taken her in her home, and had been taking care of her. It was Twilight who helped her catch up in school and read her bedtime stories. How could she want to hurt some pony who was willing to do all that?
Hi, Nix. How are you doing?
Nix jumped a little. She hadn't noticed some pony come up beside her. Looking up, she saw Apple Bloom and Twist standing near the swings. After realizing it was her friends, Nix looked back down, staring at the ground despite the comfort of her friend's presence.
I'm okay,
she lied, tears glistening at the edges of her eyes.
You don't sound okay,
pointed out Twist.
or look okay either.
Nix sniffled, rubbing a hoof across her nose.
Can I tell you two a secret? Of course,
Apple Bloom assured.
And promise not to tell anybody else. Cross my heart and hope to fly, stick a cupcake in my eye.
Apple Bloom rattled off.
What was that?
Twist asked, confused by all of the sudden movements and rhymes.
It was a Pinkie Pie promise. There's a promise named after Pinkie Pie?
Twist asked, a little confused.
Oh yeah, it's a promise between friends that you have to keep forever. Forever?
Twist echoed.
Forever.
Nix, Apple Bloom, and Twist jumped, turning to look towards the path that went by the school. Standing on the other side of the fence that surrounded the playground was Pinkie Pie, who stood glaring seriously at the three fillies. She was carrying a tray of cupcakes on her back, and her saddlebags were loaded down with assorted goodies.
Hi, Pinkie Pie,
Apple Bloom said, giving the Earth Pony a weak wave. The serious expression on Pinkie Pie's face quickly shifted back to its normal, cheerful nature.
Hey, girls. I was just taking some sweets to a party. Well, I'd better get going. You have fun. Okay. See ya.
Apple Bloom replied. The three watching Pinkie Pie bounced down the path.
That was weird,
Twist said, once she was sure Pinkie Pie was out of earshot.
It's Pinkie Pie being Pinkie Pie. It's just how she is.
Apple Bloom replied.
Still, you have to keep a Pinkie Pie promise since breaking it loses a friend's trust, and losing a friend's trust is the fastest way to lose a friend forever. Forever!
The three fillies jumped again, turning their heads. Pinkie Pie was a long way down the path, almost out of sight of the school. At the moment, she was staring down the three fillies as if she was able to hear their conversation despite the distance. Her hardened gaze drifted between them as if she was peering into their very souls. It was a gaze that sent shivers down the spines of the three young ponies. Yet, just as quickly as she had spoken out, Pinkie Pie returned to her normal perky nature, turning and bouncing around a bend in the path as she continued on her task of delivering food for a party.
If it's okay with you, Apple Bloom, I think I'll just use a normal promise,
Twist said, the yellow farm filly offering no protest.
So, what did you want to tell us, Nix?
Apple Bloom asked.
Well, when I was in the forest, I remembered things, or it felt like they were memories, even though I don't think they are. And it's some of those memories I wanted to hurt Twilight. Why would you ever want to hurt Twilight? I don't know,
Nyx blubbered, the tears she had been trying to hold back streaming down her face.
But I wanted to. I really wanted to, and I don't know why. And I don't want to hurt Twilight now because she's so nice, but... Whoa, easy, Nyx,
Applebloom said, seeing her friend was starting to hyperventilate.
Is that why you've been so sad? Because you thought you wanted to hurt Twilight?
Nyx nodded, trying to dry her eyes.
I'm not even sure what had happened, but why, but I remember wanting to hurt her before. We were both standing in some old castle ruins, and I was really tall, and when I spoke, my voice was all strange, but I remember wanting to hurt her, and I don't know why. Are you sure you weren't just dreaming?
Applebloom asked.
Dreaming? Oh, yeah.
Nyx echoed.
Yeah, dreaming. I mean, Twilight said you were way out in the Everfree forest. Maybe you just got tired and passed out and dreamed up the whole thing. You just didn't know it because of how scared you were. I mean, you ain't exactly taller than Twilight, are you? Well, no, but even if it was just a dream, I still feel bad about it. Have you told Twilight about this?
Twist asked.
Yes. And did you apologize?
Nyx sniffed and nodded.
Yes, I apologized, and she said it was all right. Well, then why are you worrying about it, you silly filly?
Applebloom asked, smiling gently.
Like you said, you don't really want to hurt Twilight, and it sounds like she's already forgiven you. As my big sister would say, it's all water under the bridge now. What does a bridge have to do with any of this?
Twist asked.
No, you see, it's an expression. What does it mean? Well, it's kind of like... look, I don't know for sure, but I know it does mean something like that once you've apologized for doing something and some pony has forgiven you, then it's okay to just forget about it. Oh, so since Twilight's forgiven Nyx for thinking that she ever wanted to hurt her, they can just both go back to being happy. Exactly,
Applebloom said with a smile.
But I may have wanted to hurt Twilight for real, and I don't know why. What if I want to hurt her again and I don't want to hurt her? Okay, we're going in circles. Time for an apple family remedy.
Applebloom said, walking behind Nyx.
Apple family what? Whoa!
Nyx went wide-eyed. Applebloom, putting her apple bucking practice to use, turned and bucked at the swing. This sent Nyx swinging skyward, her purple mane flowing behind her as the filly clung tightly to the chains. The swing reached its peak and began swooping back. Applebloom had already gotten out of the way when Nyx swung as she and Twist laughed at Nyx's panicked face.
Come on, go higher,
Applebloom encouraged.
Higher,
Twist added in her nasally tone. Nyx gulped. She was already swinging higher than she ever had before, but Twist and Applebloom's cheers filled the filly's head. Taking a deep breath, Nyx began to throw her weight into the swing, causing the swing to travel higher and higher. Eventually, the filly even reached the point where the swing began to hang loose at the top of its arc, a few moments of free fall before the chains snapped taut again. Nyx swung back and forth a number of times before her courage ran out and she let the swing slow down. But when she did stop, she was smiling and laughing along with Applebloom and Twist, who were quickly moving up beside her. See, the apple family remedy works every time.
What's the remedy? Swinging on a swing? No, having fun. Nothing can get a pony feeling better like having a little fun. Now, scoot over. It's my turn.
Applebloom replied. Nyx gladly obliged, relinquishing the swing to her friend and using her magic to push the farm filly so she could reach a similar height on the swing. Twilight smiled as she looked at the calendar on the wall, striking off another day. It had been about a month and a half since Nyx's arrival, and Twilight was happy to say that the little black filly was doing well. She had gotten caught up in school, so now instead of spending afternoons studying, Nyx was able to go out and play with her friends. There were, however, still days where Nyx chose to come back to the library, wanting Twilight to teach her more about something she learned in school. The Alicorn's curiosity was, at times, insatiable. School itself had been going better as well. After Twilight's confrontation with Diamond Tiara's dad and a few other altercations between the fillies at school, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon started going to Cheerilee's afternoon class, which in turn let Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo join the morning class. Add that to Twist and Apple Bloom, and Nyx had 4 solid friends, more than Twilight could say she had at that age, thanks to her excessive studying. Moving away from the calendar, Twilight began to shuffle and clean up books around the library. Spike was over at Rarity's place helping her, Aloysius was asleep, and Nyx was at school. All in all, it gave Twilight a quiet morning to clean up the mess caused by her usual study practices. Putting the books back on the shelf, Twilight glanced at some of the titles, thinking about whether or not she had read them. At this point, the unicorn had read most of the books in the library, but she still at times came across books she hadn't read. Some books she hadn't read by choice. Others she simply hadn't had the time for yet. All of the books Twilight put away were ones she had read, but the unicorn lingered on the last book. It was a book of folklore, old stories from Equestria's past. It was from that book that Twilight had read about the elements of harmony and Nightmare Moon's prophesied return. Without even thinking about it, Twilight opened the book to the folktale in question, her eyes glancing over the beautiful illustrations before reaching the first line. Once upon a time, in the magical land of Equestria, there were 2 regal sisters who ruled together and created harmony for all the land. To do this, the eldest... I'm home! Twilight smiled, setting the book down on the reading table as Nyx came running into the library, quickly moving over and nuzzling up against Twilight.
Hey there, Nyx. How was school today? Great,
the filly chirped.
Cherylee told us that we're going to be putting on a play.
Really?
Yep. She says that every spring the school puts on a play for Ponyville Spring Festival. It's this really cool thing where a bunch of musicians, artists, and entertainers come to Ponyville and every pony has a lot of fun.
The Spring Festival,
Twilight repeated as she thought for a moment.
If I remember correctly, it was started by a traveling group of musicians that came to Ponyville every year around this time as they toured Equestria. Eventually, other musicians started showing up at the same time, and after a few years, it grew into a festival.
Yeah, that's what Cherylee said,
Nyx replied.
And she says we can pick what the play will be about, and then we'll all have something to do.
Well, doesn't that sound fun? Did you have any ideas?
I was kind of hoping I'd find a good story in one of the library books.
Twilight smiled.
That's a great idea. Books have some of the best stories, but just remember that it's meant to be a school play, so try to pick a story that's short and one that all of your friends will like.
Okay.
Nyx agreed, about to open her mouth and ask for Twilight's help further. Still, the filly was interrupted as the library door opened, Applejack running in.
Twi, there you are. I need your help with something fierce. What's wrong, Applejack? Some nasty plant showed up in Sweet Apple Acres. It's a vine and it's starting to grow up around some of them trees. You got any books in here that can tell us what it is?
Twilight nodded, her horn glowing as she grabbed a number of phytopathology books from the shelves and her saddlebags. The books flew into the bags settling on Twilight's back as the unicorn looked over her shoulder.
Nyx, I've got to help Applejack. Will you be okay by yourself for a little while?
Sure. I'll just try and find a story for my school play.
Twilight nodded.
Good. Now, if you need some help, Spike is at Rarity's and Aloysius is asleep in the bedroom upstairs. I'll be back soon.
Okay, Twilight.
Thanks again, Twi.
Applejack said as she and Twilight galloped out the door. I don't know what this nasty plant is, but I know it ain't good for my apple trees. With that, the door to the library shut under Nyx's magic, leaving little Nyx to her studies. The disguised Alicorn looked about the room for a few minutes, mindlessly skimming the books on the shelves for something that looked like a storybook before she took notice of one book that was left sitting out. After drawing close, Nyx was drawn in by the book's beautiful illustrations. Her eyes quickly found their way to the first line, eager to begin reading. Once upon a time, in the magical land of Equestria, there were 2 regal sisters who ruled together and created harmony for all the land. To do this, the eldest...
So, do you know what the play is supposed to be about?
Twilight asked as she walked with Rarity in the direction of the Ponyville Elementary School. The pair of unicorns had volunteered to help the students prepare the show, though all the actual work was going to be done by the fillies and colts. It was a chance for the students to find their cutie marks, and it was a similar school play that helped Rarity discover her special talent in fashion and clothes making.
I've asked Sweetie Belle, but she's refused to tell me. Says we'll find out today. She seems really excited, though. Is she going to be acting in the play, or is she helping in some other way? My sister wanted to help with the costumes, but
After she mentioned to Cherylee that she was the one that made the costumes for the Crusaders' appearance in the talent show, Cherylee encouraged Sweetie Belle to take one of the acting parts, a part with singing. Oh, that's good. Sweetie Belle has such an amazing voice, so it will be nice to hear her sing. Yes, it will. Personally, I'd bet that singing is her own special talent, but we just can't be sure until that little cutie mark of hers appears, can we? Twilight shook her head as the pair began getting closer to the schoolhouse. While the school and its playground were set up on one side of the path, the school's outdoor stage was set up on the opposite side of the road, the one and only permanent stage in Ponyville. Cherylee stood in the center of the many colts and fillies, giving directions to the eagerly listening young ponies. After all, doing the play meant they got out of normal schoolwork for at least part of the day. Still, when Cherylee saw Twilight and Rarity approaching, the teacher decided to let the students slip off to recess a little earlier than scheduled so she could talk with the two unicorns.
You two have excellent timing,
Cherylee greeted as the children ran off to play, Nyx giving a wave to Twilight before running off with her friends.
I was just telling the class how you were kind enough to volunteer your time to help us make this play.
Always glad to help, Cherylee,
said Twilight.
though we still haven't been told just what the play is supposed to be about.
Oh, of course.
Here.
Cherylee replied, using a hoof to push a few scripts across the ground. Twilight picked up a script, and Rarity looked over her shoulder as they read the title on the cover.
Reunion of the Royal Pony Sisters,
Twilight read aloud. Cherylee smiled.
Yes, it was Nyx's idea. She found an old fairy tale about how Princesses Celestia and Luna kept the world in balance, and then how Luna became the frightful Nightmare Moon. Apple Bloom then had the idea to incorporate the adventure you and your friends had while you beat Nightmare Moon and restored Princess Luna back to normal.
Wow, that's actually not a bad story. A wonderful little tale for a little school play. Much better than the usual fare, Rarity mused. What are the plays usually about? Well, at least when I was a young filly, our spring festival play was about a pony picnic that got stolen by ants. It was cute, but not exactly what you would call great theater. Though it was because of that particular play that I got my cutie mark. This, however, looks far more interesting, Rarity praised, flipping through a copy of the script.
It's so exciting. Usually, the school play is held on the day before the spring festival, and we just have it on our little stage here. But I told the mayor what we were planning, and she said if the students can do a good enough job, we might just get our own slot in the festival. It would be a wonderful opportunity for the kids to perform for not only their parents, but also for the whole town on that big stage they set up in the town square,
said Cherylee. Rarity perked up, nudging Twilight as she pointed to a spot on the script.
Oh, and look here, they have Pinkie Pie's song.
You mean the song she sang in the Everfree forest when she was telling us to giggle at the ghostly and crack up at the creepy?
Twilight asked, flipping to the same page in the script.
The very one. Oh, I can only imagine how Pinkie Pie will react when she hears them singing it. We won't be able to stop her from bouncing for days.
Twilight giggled, picturing Pinkie Pie's reaction.
Yeah, she'll probably start singing along right there in the audience. Still, this looks fun.
Oh, yes, it's going to be one of the best plays the school has ever put on.
Cherylee energetically agreed.
I've actually pulled together both classes because there are just so many parts to the play and things to be done. And we've already got the characters casted. You can see who's who on the first page.
Twilight and Rarity nodded, flipping to the first page of the script. Reunion of the Royal Pony Sisters, a Ponyville Elementary School production. Written by Cherylee. Music composed by Lyra. Narrator, Zecora. Twilight Sparkle, Dinky Doo, Applejack, Apple Bloom. Rarity, Sweetie Belle. Rainbow Dash, Scootaloo. Fluttershy, Cotton Candy. Pinkie Pie, by Sunny Days. The Mayor, by Little Hoof. Sea Serpent, Tornado Bolt. Manticore, Archer. Princess Celestia, Diamond Tiara. Princess Luna, Silver Spoon. Nightmare Moon, Nyx. Ponyville Residents and Everfree Forest Trees. Hot Rod, Berry Pinch, Paradise, Tootsie Flute, White Lightning, Peachy Pie, and Lily Dash. Set design by Berry Pinch, Paradise, and Peachy Pie. Costumes by Sunny Days, Tootsie Flute, and Lily Dash. Stage hooves, Hot Rod and White Lightning.
Zecora, I'm surprised you were able to get her to be the narrator.
Rarity said, glancing up from the page.
It was Apple Bloom that actually convinced her. From what I hear, she has an exceptional voice,
replied Cheerilee.
Oh, she does. She does. Her voice is perfect for a story of this genre, narrating an epic tale. Yet, I'd suggest you let her come up with her own lines.
Cheerilee raised an eyebrow.
Why is that? Zecora speaks in rhymes very naturally, and having a rhyming narrator would just give the whole play a very old-world fairy tale appeal. That, and I can't imagine what her voice would sound like if she didn't rhyme like she does. I'll be sure to sit down with her then and work on the script,
Cheerilee assured. Rarity nodded with a smile, reading further down the page. Well,
would you look at that? Sweetie Belle is going to be playing me. Though, I suppose that does make sense. She has my wonderful white coat. Oh, and Scootaloo gets to be Rainbow Dash. She must be positively ecstatic. Oh, yes,
Cheerilee agreed.
Scootaloo was practically begging for the chance to play Rainbow Dash the moment she realized she'd be a character in the play. It's also a character that suits her since she talks so much like Rainbow Dash. Yes, Scootaloo is definitely a filly you hear saying awesome just about as much as Dash,
Rarity agreed, continuing to read down the page.
Let's see. Don't know her. Or her. Wait. The Sea Serpent? Do you mean Stephen Magnet? Who? Stephen Magnet. That's the name of the sea serpent we met on our way to find the elements of harmony. Oh, I do hope you're portraying him well. Such a well-groomed and polite sea serpent shouldn't be regated to the role of a simple monster. Wouldn't you agree, Twilight? Twilight?
Rarity and Cheerilee turned to look at Twilight, who was stiff as a statue and a few shades paler than she normally was.
Twilight, dear, what's wrong?
Rarity asked, noticing the unicorn's eyes were focused on the page. Returning to her own copy of the script, Rarity read down a few more lines, then froze up too, pupils contracting.
Is something wrong?
Cheerilee asked, concerned why the two unicorns were acting so strangely.
Oh, of course not,
Rarity replied, regaining her composure.
I was just curious about some of your casting. For example, what makes you think Nyx will play a good Nightmare Moon? She's a sweetheart, and she's also very timid and sensitive. Nightmare Moon, on the other hoof, was, that's actually the point of the casting, Rarity. To be characters we usually aren't. Besides, it was Scootaloo that suggested it, and every pony in class agreed that Nyx would do the best Nightmare Moon, if only because she has a black coat. I asked Nyx if she was okay with that, and she didn't seem to mind at all. Oh, well, I suppose if Nyx agreed to the role, I think she'll be just fine. Nyx is a smart filly, which is good, because Nightmare Moon is one of those characters that has a lot of lines. Not as much as, say, your character, Twilight, but still a significant amount of lines. I have little doubt that Nyx will be able to memorize what she needs to say. Of course. I'm sure she'll be a perfect Nightmare Moon. Don't you agree, Twilight?
Rarity asked, elbowing the purple unicorn in the side, snapping Twilight out of her shock.
Oh yes. Of course. Perfect,
Twilight said with a forced grin.
It's going to be so much fun,
Nyx chirped as she bounced around the kitchen with Twilight following a few steps behind. Over the course of dinner, Nyx had chattered almost constantly about the upcoming play. The filly had just come back from the dress rehearsal, returning to her library in her full Nightmare Moon costume.
Are you sure?
Twilight asked.
You're going to be up on stage in front of a lot of ponies.
It is kind of scary,
Nyx admitted, her enthusiasm diminishing as she turned to face Twilight.
But every pony else is really excited about it and are having a lot of fun.
But what if you forget a line?
Cheerilee promised she's going to be just off stage so she can whisper our lines to us if we forget.
Nyx answered.
But I've been studying my lines really hard.
Nyx frowned a little, glancing off to the side.
That, and Diamond Tiara's been saying I'm not good enough to play Nightmare Moon and that Cheerilee should just get a rock since it would do a better job. But I'm going to show her.
Nyx snapped with determination.
I'm going to do my best and I'm not going to forget a single line. I'm going to be the best Nightmare Moon I can be.
Twilight winced, cursing herself quietly before sighing.
I'm sorry, Nyx. but you can't be in the play.
The little filly stood stunned for a moment, her brain having trouble processing what she had just heard.
What?
I said you can't be in the play,
Twilight repeated with more authority in her voice.
But,
The filly stammered in confusion.
why can't I be in the play? Did I do something bad?
No, you just... I'm sorry, Nix, but you just can't be in the play.
But the play is tomorrow and they won't be able to perform it without me.
Twilight frowned, feeling her heart twist in her chest. It had been a few weeks since the unicorn found out the little filly was going to be Nightmare Moon in the play, and over those 2 weeks Twilight had agonized over what to do, to either let Nix participate in the play, or to make up an excuse and keep her at the library. Twilight had actually started leaning towards letting Nix be in the play, considering how much fun she seemed to be having. 2 things, however, quickly changed Twilight's mind. The first was the announcement that Princesses Celestia and Luna were going to be attending the Spring Festival, having heard that the Ponyville Elementary School was going to be telling the story of Princess Luna's return, the first stage performance of the story. Twilight knew Nix's disguise could fool common ponies, but she couldn't expect it to fool the princesses. Princess Luna had been Nightmare Moon, and Princess Celestia was arguably just as familiar with the Mare and the Moon. They would surely notice Nix's resemblance, and Twilight feared Nix would be banished on the spot. The other thing that had swayed Twilight was when she had finally seen Nix's costume. The armor was made of stiff fabric and wire, and the wings were fake. The sparkling mane was obviously just indigo fabric with sparkles, but it was enough that Nix looked just too much like Nightmare Moon, especially with the moon cutie mark painted on her flank. Sure, some ponies in Ponyville might just think the costume was wonderful, but Twilight feared others would draw unwanted conclusions.
I'm sorry, Nix, but they'll just have to make do without you.
But...
Nix pleaded, only for Twilight to shake her head firmly.
I said no, Nix.
Nix tensed up, sniffling a little. She, however, didn't break down and cry. Instead, the filly glared up at Twilight, stamping her hooves against the floor.
But it's not fair! I haven't done anything wrong that I shouldn't get punished. I should be able to go to the play.
Nix.
No!
Nix snapped, cutting Twilight off as she threw her first temper tantrum.
It's not fair. I've worked really hard and I've learned all my lines.
Nix.
It's not fair!
Nix!
Twilight barked, forcing the filly to fall silent as she looked at Twilight, still very angry.
I'm sorry. I really am. But this is just how it has to be. Now, I want you to go upstairs and take that costume off.
But...
Upstairs!
Twilight said, stamping her hoof. Nix met Twilight's hard gaze, trying to glare down the unicorn, but when that failed, the filly broke down. Nix bolted upstairs, wailing the whole way up before she slammed her bedroom door shut behind her.
Twilight, don't you think you should just let her be in the play?
Spike asked.
I mean, she was really looking forward to it.
Twilight's face fell.
I know she was, Spike, and I want to let her, but it's just too risky. If Princesses Celestia and Luna were able to figure out the truth, that she was made by the spell those cultists were casting, they'd banish her to the moon, take her away. I can't let that happen.
Spike crossed his arms and looked at Twilight with a very skeptical expression.
Do you really think Celestia would do that? I mean, she trusts you completely. I'm sure you could convince her that Nix isn't Nightmare Moon. I'm glad you think so, Spike,
Twilight said before heaving a heavy sigh.
But I just can't risk it. Now, Spike and I have to meet with the princesses this evening. Princess Celestia expects me and him to be there to watch the evening performances with her and Princess Luna,
Twilight said, talking to Nix, the filly dressed in her normal everyday clothes.
Aloysius will be keeping an eye on you, and I expect you to behave for him.
Yes, ma'am.
Nix said, the tone of disappointment thick in her voice. It unnerved Twilight because it was the first time Nix was truly angry with her. Still, this was for the best.
I am sorry, Nix, and I'll make this up to you,
Twilight promised as she turned to leave.
Now, try not to think about it. Spike and I will be back soon.
Okay.
She sulked. With that, Twilight stepped out of the door, closing it tightly behind her. Aloysius then flew across the room, taking the key from the door lock in his talons before landing on the edge of Twilight's writing desk. Nyx scrunched up her face in anger once Twilight was gone and kicked at some books on the floor. She then began stomping around.
It isn't fair! It isn't fair! Charlie is expecting me to be there and they're all counting on me and I practiced so hard! It isn't fair! Oh.
Nyx looked over at Aloysius, who was watching her. The filly then went wide-eyed, quickly scampering over to the owl.
Please, Aloysius, let me go to the play. Everybody is counting on me. They won't be able to do it without me. I'm supposed to be Nightmare Moon, and you can't tell the story without Nightmare Moon. Oh? Nightmare Moon, the bad bear. Please, Aloysius. Please, 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 please.
Nyx begged. The owl's gaze met Nyx's, the filly looking up at him with the biggest, most pleasing eyes she could muster. She was even doing a trick that Sweetie Belle had taught her, the filly pushing out her bottom lip in a pout. Aloysius, however, only continued to stare back, his beady eyes and non-expressive beak a perfect poker face crafted by nature itself. Aloysius wasn't moved, his clawed grip on the door key tightening. Nyx, however, had one more trick. She began to add her own touch to the carefully crafted display of begging. As she let her eyes water, a few pitiful tears began to streak down the filly's cheeks. While the school had been practicing for the play, Silver Spoon and Diamond Tiara were asked to try and learn to cry on command, since the royal sisters were supposed to cry when they reunited at the end of the play. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon hadn't been able to do it, but in a private place backstage, Nyx decided to try and found that, if she thought about the right things, she could get her eyes to water. It was a trick she had yet to put to use, but, with the royal pony sisters as her witness, she was going to take advantage of that ability if it meant she could go to the play. Aloysius stared at Nyx coldly as he had before, but within a few moments the owl was forced to look away, hooting in defeat. Nyx's begging was just too much to bear. Taking off, Aloysius flew across the room and expertly placed the key in the door lock. He then circled around, making another pass as the key opened the door.
Oh, thank you, Aloysius. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Nyx said with several bounces before running upstairs. In a flash, the filly alicorn got out of her vest and tossed her glasses off before pulling out her costume. With a single leap, Nyx landed in all four of the costume shoes and began putting on the other bits of fake armor. Cheryl would paint on the fake cutie mark once Nyx got to the performance, but she would have to get the rest of the costume on herself. The bits of fake armor were easy enough. But then came the challenging part, the costume's wings. Feathers glued on wooden wings that were then secured to a vest that was similar to the one she wore on a daily basis, though the costume vest was all black, so it was difficult to notice at a distance. Personally, Nyx didn't see the point of wearing fake wings when she had real ones, but Twilight had insisted that if she was going to be in the play, she had to wear the whole costume. The fake wings, however, were difficult to get on. It was the one part of the costume that wasn't very well designed and usually needed to be put on before the helmet. Nyx, however, had already put the helmet on and didn't want to waste time taking off the helmet. Nyx struggled and fumbled with the fake wings, and was making progress up until the point she tripped on her own hooves. She let out a panicked eep as she fell to one side and the wings sliding off her back. The wings hit the floor first and Nyx landed right on top of them. The fall punctuated by the sound of splintering wood.
No! No!
Nyx cried, now starting to shed genuine tears while looking at the horribly bent wings. The filly nudged at them with her hoof, which only caused the fake wings to snap in half and flop across the floor. Nyx may have started to wail if she hadn't glanced back at where the fake wings would have been, and took notice of the real wings that were already there.
Well, if I keep them straight all night, that might work.
Nyx mumbled to herself, extending her little wings vertically. The filly knew she was going to be in so much trouble with Twilight once she got home, not only for sneaking out to the play, but also for going out with her real wings visible. Still, at the moment, she was less afraid of being punished by Twilight than she was of disappointing the rest of her class. She did not want to let down her few friends, and she was already unpopular enough with the rest of the class. Every pony in class, except her friends, either thought of her as a crybaby, a teacher's pet, or both. Ruining the play would only make things worse. Determination flaring, Nyx broke the fake wings off the costume vest, using a pair of scissors to cut some crude holes in the fabric. She then slipped it on over her wings, making it kind of look like her wings were the fake costume wings. The vest had obviously been cut around the area where the wings were supposed to connect, but Nyx could only hope no pony would notice. With the costume on, Nix made sure she wasn't missing anything else before galloping back downstairs and out the front door. She doubled back only once, poking her head in the library door to offer a final loud, "Thank you!" to Aloysius before running off towards the center of Ponyville. Alright, guys, that was Chapter 5 of Past Sins. This is Vos de Sueños signing off. Safe travels, every pony.